The silence in the house after Larry died was not a peaceful thing. It was a presence, a thick, suffocating blanket of quiet that clung to the furniture and muted the light filtering through the windows. For 47 years, this house had been filled with the comfortable noise of our life together. Larry's booming laugh, the television murmuring his favorite westerns, the clatter of his tools from the garage. Now there was only the hum of the refrigerator and the frantic, hollow beat of my own heart. Grief was a physical weight. A stone settled deep in my chest that made every breath an effort. In the first few weeks, I moved through the rooms like a ghost, a specter in my own home, tidying things that were already tidy, folding laundry that was already folded, my hands needing a task to keep from trembling. My son, Dennis, and his wife, Monica, had been a whirlwind of performative sorrow and practical arrangements, their voices sharp and efficient where mine had failed. They handled the funeral, the calls, the endless parade of casseroles from well-meaning neighbors, and for that I was grateful. But underneath their fussing, I felt a current of something else, something cold and proprietary. They looked at me not with sympathy, but with assessment, as if I were another piece of property to be managed. Larry had seen it coming. In his final months, when the illness had pared him down to little more than bone and spirit, his mind had remained as sharp as a shard of glass. One evening, as I sat by his bedside holding his frail hand, he had turned his head on the pillow, his eyes locking onto mine with a fierce intensity that startled me. "Alice," he'd whispered, his voice a dry rasp. "You listen to me. When I'm gone, they're going to circle. Dennis is a good boy, but he's weak. And that woman, Monica, she's got a calculator where her heart should be." The words hung in the air, brutal in their honesty. I had wanted to protest, to defend my only son, but I knew Larry was right. I had seen the way Monica's eyes scanned our home, lingering on the antique sideboard, the silver tea set, the paintings we had collected over a lifetime. I had heard the way she spoke to Dennis, her voice a silken thread of suggestion that always, somehow, led to her own benefit. "You've spent your whole life taking care of everyone else, Allie," Larry continued, his thumb stroking the back of my hand. "It's your turn now. You can't let them put you in a cage. Promise me you'll fight for your own life." I had promised, tears blurring his beloved face, the word a solemn vow made to a dying man. He had been specific. "Go see Mr. Henderson, the lawyer. Don't tell them. Get everything in order. Your name, your money, your house. Make sure they can't touch a damn thing. Make sure they can't say you've lost your wits and ship you off to some home that smells of bleach and despair." The thought had sent a chill through me. A nursing home. To be stripped of my home, my memories, my independence, and warehoused until the end. The image was so terrifying, so bleak, that it ignited a flicker of defiance in the vast sea of my sorrow. Larry knew. He had always been my protector, and even as he prepared to leave me, he was still trying to build a fortress around me. So, a week after the funeral, while Dennis and Monica thought I was at my grief support group, I drove our old, lumbering sedan to Mr. Henderson's office downtown. The leather of the driver's seat was worn smooth from Larry's long years behind the wheel, and for a moment, I felt a pang of such profound loss that I almost turned back. But then I remembered my promise. I was not just Larry's widow. I was Alice King, and I had a life left to live. Mr. Henderson was a kind, elderly man with spectacles perched on the end of his nose, and he had been Larry's friend as well as his lawyer. He listened patiently as I explained Larry's fears, my own anxieties echoing them. He nodded gravely, his expression one of understanding, not surprise. It was a story, he implied, that was depressingly common. Over the next few weeks we worked in secret. He arranged for a full geriatric psychological evaluation with a respected doctor, a series of tests that I passed with flying colors. The resulting report was a thick, professionally bound document that declared me to be of perfectly sound mind and fully capable of managing my own affairs. We drafted a new ironclad will that left a token amount to Dennis, enough to prevent him from contesting it, with the bulk of my estate, the house, the savings, the investments Larry and I had so carefully built, going to a charitable trust dedicated to animal welfare, a cause dear to my heart. We established a durable power of attorney and a healthcare directive. naming my sister in another state as my agent, completely bypassing my son. Every document was signed, notarized, and copied. Mr. Henderson handed me a thick manila envelope. "Keep this somewhere safe, Alice," he'd advised. "But also somewhere you can get to it. Think of it as your insurance policy." I had taken the envelope home and hidden it in the back of my closet, behind a stack of old photo albums. It felt like a weapon, heavy and potent. My first act of true independence, however, was the car. The old sedan felt like a relic of a past life. A life where I was always the passenger. It smelled of Larry's cigars and was filled with his maps and tools. Driving it felt like wearing his shoes. They were comfortable and familiar, but they would never truly be mine. I wanted something that belonged only to me, something that represented a new beginning. So, I sold the old car and, with a portion of the life insurance money that was solely in my name, I bought a modest, nearly new compact car. It was silver, sleek, and utterly my own. The dealership had tried to upsell me, of course, a little old lady on her own, but I remembered Larry's lessons on negotiation. I stood my ground, firm and polite, and walked away with a fair price and a sense of exhilarating triumph. Driving it home, the new car smell filling my lungs, I felt a lightness I hadn't experienced in months. The engine was quiet, the steering responsive. It was a symbol. It was my escape pod, my declaration of freedom, my promise to myself that my world would not shrink to the four walls of this silent house. It was hope in the form of steel and glass. I parked it in the driveway, admiring the way the afternoon sun glinted off the silver paint. It looked small and brave next to Larry's hulking old workshop. I spent the rest of the day in a state of quiet bliss, reading the owner's manual from cover to cover, adjusting the mirrors, pairing my phone to the Bluetooth system. I planned my first trip, a drive up the coast just for the day, to feel the salt spray on my face and watch the waves crash against the shore. I would pack a thermos of tea and a sandwich and I would go wherever the road took me. I didn't have to ask for permission. I didn't have to coordinate schedules. I was free. The feeling was so potent, so intoxicating, that it almost overshadowed my grief for a few precious hours. That evening I called Dennis, my voice brighter than it had been in a long time, to tell him my news. There was a beat of stunned silence on the other end of the line. You bought a car," he finally stammered. I could hear Monica's sharp whisper in the background, a hiss of static and venom. "What on earth for?" Dennis asked, his tone shifting from surprise to disapproval. "To drive, of course," I said, my good mood beginning to curdle. "I'm going to take a trip up the coast tomorrow." Another pause, more whispering. "Mom, I don't think that's a good idea," he said, his voice now taking on that patronizing, overly patient tone he used when he thought I was being difficult. "You're still upset. You're not thinking clearly. We'll come over tomorrow morning and we can talk about it." Before I could argue, he had hung up. The beautiful, liberating feeling I had cherished all day evaporated, replaced by a familiar, sinking dread. The stone was back in my chest, heavier than ever. They arrived the next morning as promised. Dennis walked in with a strained, placating smile on his face, while Monica swept past me with a brisk, "Hello, Alice," her eyes already scanning the room as if for signs of my impending senility. She carried a Tupperware container of what she called her famous lemon loaf, a dry, crumbly confection that was her standard offering when she was about to be particularly unpleasant. It was a Trojan horse made of flour and artificial flavoring. They sat me down at my own kitchen table, the two of them on one side, a united front, with me on the other. "Mom," Dennis began, leaning forward and folding his hands earnestly, "we're worried about you. This car, it's an impulsive decision. A big purchase like that, right after Dad," he trailed off, letting the implication hang in the air. That my grief had addled my brain. That I was no longer competent. "I am perfectly fine, Dennis," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "I wanted a new car, so I bought one. It's as simple as that." Monica let out a little sigh, a sound of profound and weary disappointment. "Oh, Alice," she said, placing a hand on Dennis's arm. "We know you think you're fine. But you're 75 years old. Your reflexes aren't what they used to be. A new car is a huge responsibility. And frankly, it's a waste of money. Money you'll need for your future care, future care. The phrase landed like a punch. They weren't talking about helping me with groceries or mowing the lawn. They were talking about the nursing home. The place that smelled of bleach and despair. The cage Larry had warned me about. Anger, hot and sharp, pierced through the fog of my grief. How dare they? How dare they sit in my kitchen? A kitchen where I had baked thousands of cookies for Dennis, hosted countless family dinners, and soothed his childhood fevers, and talk about shipping me off to a facility as if I were a piece of faulty equipment. I looked at my son, at the face I had loved since the moment he was born, and for the first time I saw a stranger. I saw a weak man parroting the greedy words of his wife, a woman who saw me not as a mother, but as an obstacle between her and an inheritance. The love and sacrifice I had poured into him for 45 years had vanished, replaced by this cold, calculating appraisal of my worth. I am not going into a home, I stated, my voice shaking with a rage I had not felt in years. This is my home, and that is my car, and this is my money. I will decide how I spend all of it. Monica's sweet facade cracked. Her lips thinned into a hard line. See, Dennis? This is what I mean. She's being irrational and aggressive. It's a classic sign. She patted his arm again. We're only thinking of you, Mom, Dennis said, his eyes pleading with me to just give in, to make things easy for him. We think it's best if you don't drive for a while, just until you're feeling more yourself. Let me just hold on to the keys for you. For safekeeping, he held out his hand, his palm upturned, as if offering a treat to a skittish animal. The condescension was breathtaking. He saw me as a child, incompetent and foolish. I clutched my purse where the keys were nestled in a side pocket, the metal cool against my fingers. For a moment I considered fighting, screaming, throwing them out of my house. But then a different thought entered my mind, a cold, clear, and utterly calm idea. It was the memory of Mr. Henderson's words. Think of it as your insurance policy. The plan unfolded in my mind, fully formed and perfect in its simplicity. I had been preparing for this battle for weeks. I just hadn't realized the first shot would be fired so soon. I let my shoulders slump. I allowed a look of weary defeat to settle on my face. I even managed to squeeze out a single pathetic tear. Maybe you're right, I mumbled, looking down at my hands. I'm just so confused since your father passed. I don't know what I'm thinking. Dennis's face flooded with relief. Monica's expression softened into one of triumphant pity. They had won. Or so they thought. I slowly reached into my purse and pulled out the small, sleek key fob. The silver emblem of the car manufacturer glinted under the kitchen light. I placed it in Dennis's outstretched hand. His fingers closed around it, a gesture of finality. Thank you, Mom, he said, his voice thick with false sincerity. You'll see. This is for the best. We'll take care of everything for you. Yes, Alice, Monica chimed in, her syrupy smile back in place. Don't you worry your pretty little head about a thing. They stood up to leave, their mission accomplished. As they walked to the door, Dennis turned back. We'll get that car sold for you, Mom. Get you a good price. Put the money away for a rainy day. He patted his pocket, where my keys now resided. He was so sure of himself, so confident in his control over me. He had no idea he was walking into a perfectly laid trap. After they left, the silence that returned was different. It was not the heavy, grief-stricken quiet of before. It was a charged, electric silence, humming with the potential energy of my plan. I walked over to the closet and retrieved the manila envelope. The documents felt cool and powerful in my hands. I took out one of the notarized copies of each paper. The letter from the geriatric specialist attesting to my mental fitness, the legal notice of my new durable power of attorney assigned to my sister, the front page of my revised last will and testament with its stark, unyielding clauses, and a summary of my financial assets, proving sole and unassailable ownership. I walked out to the new silver car, the spare key from my purse in my hand. The interior still smelled of possibility. I opened the glove box, placed the stack of papers inside, and closed it with a satisfying click. Then I went back inside, made myself a cup of tea, and sat at my kitchen table. I waited for 2 hours, letting them get comfortable, letting them bask in their victory. I pictured them at their own home, Monica probably already browsing online for ways to spend my money, Dennis convincing himself that he had done the right and noble thing for his poor, grieving mother. Then I picked up my phone. My fingers were perfectly steady as I typed out the short, simple text message to my son. Dennis, there is something for you in the car. Check the glove box. I hit send. And then I waited for the insurance policy to pay out. The minutes after I sent the text stretched into an eternity, each tick of the grandfather clock in the hall a tiny hammer blow against the silence. I sat at the kitchen table, my teacup cold between my hands, and imagined the scene. I pictured Dennis receiving the message, perhaps with a flicker of annoyance. He would think I had left my wallet or my glasses in the car, another sign of my supposed feebleness. He would say something to Monica, something like, "Mom forgot something in the car, I'll be right back." And she would roll her eyes with that long-suffering air she had perfected. He would walk out to my beautiful silver car, sitting in his driveway like a trophy of his conquest, and he would open the passenger door. He would lean in, pop open the glove box, expecting to see a pair of reading glasses or a crumpled tissue, and instead he would find the envelope. He would see his own name written on it in my familiar cursive. Curiosity, not yet alarm, would make him pull it out. He would see the legal seals, the notarized stamps, the formal letterhead. And then he would begin to read. I imagined the blood draining from his face as he scanned the first document, the psychiatrist's report. Words like excellent cognitive function, sound judgment, and fully competent would leap off the page, directly contradicting every condescending assumption he and his wife had made. He would see that my decision to buy the car was not the act of a grief-stricken old woman, but the calculated move of a person in full command of her faculties. The ground beneath his feet, so solid just moments before, would begin to crumble. Next, he would read the letter detailing the new power of attorney. He would see that he had been replaced. Not just replaced, but deliberately and legally excised from my life's most critical decisions. The power to manage my finances, to make medical choices, had not been given to him, the dutiful son, but to my sister Martha, a woman who lived 500 miles away but who had always respected my intelligence and my autonomy. The message would be unmistakable. I did not trust him. The sting of that rejection I hoped would be sharp and deep. Then his eyes would fall upon the most brutal document of all, the summary page of my new will. He would see the clause, written in the cold, unforgiving language of the law, that left him a paltry sum, an amount so small it was an insult, specifically worded to acknowledge him as my living issue. He would see the vast remainder of the estate, his inheritance, the prize he and Monica had been salivating over, bequeathed to a charity for stray dogs and cats. He would understand in that one heart-stopping moment that his future, the comfortable life he had envisioned for himself built upon the foundations of my death, had just evaporated. The house, the stocks, the savings, all of it gone, snatched away and given to a pack of homeless animals. The irony would be lost on him then, but perhaps not forever. He, who had treated his own mother like a stray to be managed and corralled, had been replaced by them. I pictured him sitting there, in the passenger seat of my car, the papers trembling in his hands. The confident, patronizing man who had taken my keys just hours before would be gone, replaced by a stunned, horrified shell. The world he had constructed, a world where he was in control, where his mother was a dotty old woman to be placated and managed, would have shattered into a million pieces. He would feel the full weight of his betrayal, not as a moral failing, but as a catastrophic strategic error. He had underestimated me. He had listened to his wife. He had been greedy and foolish, and now he was facing the consequences. I imagined him stopping the car in shock if he had been driving, but I knew he was likely at his own home, making this discovery in his own driveway, which somehow felt even more satisfying. His sanctuary was now the scene of his undoing. The phone rang, shrill and jarring in the quiet house. I let it ring 3 times before I answered, my voice deliberately calm and even. "Hello, Dennis." There was a choked, strangled sound on the other end of the line. "Mom? What is this?" This has to be a joke. His voice was thin, reedy, stripped of all its earlier confidence. It is not a joke, Dennis, I said, my tone as cool and clear as a winter morning. It is my insurance policy. Larry told me to protect myself. It seems he was right. I could hear his ragged breathing, the sound of a man drowning in the consequences of his own actions. But the will everything to a dog shelter? Mom, how could you? The raw anguish in his voice was not for me, or for our broken relationship. It was for the money. The naked, ugly truth of it was finally laid bare. How could I? I repeated, and this time, the anger I had suppressed for so long finally bled into my voice, hot and righteous. How could you, Dennis? How could you and that wife of yours come into my home, the home your father and I built with our bare hands, and treat me like a child? How could you steal my car keys and talk about putting me in a home? You didn't see a grieving mother. You saw a bank account with a fading heartbeat. You made your choice when you took those keys. Now you get to live with it. There was a long, shuddering silence. I could hear Monica's voice in the background, sharp and questioning. What is it, Denny? What's wrong? I imagined him holding up the papers, his face ashen, and the look of horror that would dawn on her face as she, the architect of this whole disaster, realized what I had done. She would not see it as a betrayal of a mother by her son. She would see it as a failure of her own manipulative strategy. Her prize had been snatched from her grasp. Mom, please, Dennis whispered, his voice cracking. We can fix this. I was wrong. Monica, she gets ideas in her head. I'll bring the keys back right now. We can go to the lawyer, we can tear up these papers. The desperation was pathetic. He was bargaining, trying to undo the damage, not because he was sorry for hurting me, but because he was terrified of being poor. No, Dennis, I said, and the finality in my own voice surprised me. The steel rod of resolve that had been forming in my spine was now fully forged. There is nothing to fix. You showed me who you are. You showed me what my son has become. The papers are not the problem. They are the solution. They protect me from you. But I love you, Mom, he cried, and the words, which once would have melted my heart, now sounded hollow and false, a desperate incantation to ward off financial ruin. Your love seems to come with a price tag, Dennis, I replied, my voice devoid of emotion. And I am no longer willing to pay it. Do not call me again tonight. I need to think. I hung up the phone before he could reply. I stood up from the kitchen table and walked to the window, looking out at the garden Larry and I had tended for decades. The rage was gone, replaced by a vast, empty calm. There was no triumph, not yet. There was only a profound and weary sadness. I had lost my husband, and now, in a way, I had lost my son. But as I stood there, watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, I realized I had also found something. I had found myself. Alice King. A woman who was not just a wife or a mother, but a person of strength and substance, a person who would not be caged. The days that followed were a strange mixture of turmoil and peace. My phone was bombarded with calls and texts from Dennis. They ranged from frantic and pleading to angry and accusatory. He blamed Monica. He blamed my grief. He blamed everyone but himself. I did not respond. I needed the silence to heal, to let the new shape of my life settle around me. My neighbor and dear friend Jean, who had watched the whole drama with the car unfold from her window, came over with a bottle of wine the evening after my fateful text. She was a no-nonsense widow herself, a woman who had fought her own battles with greedy relatives. She poured 2 glasses, sat down opposite me, and raised hers in a toast. To Alice King, she said, her eyes twinkling. The woman who finally told them where to stick it. I laughed, a real genuine laugh that felt like a release. We talked for hours, and for the first time, I told someone everything. Larry's warning, the secret meetings with the lawyer, the cold fury that had guided my actions. Jean listened, nodding, her support a warm, comforting blanket. You did the right thing, honey, she said, squeezing my hand. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for your children is to teach them a lesson they'll never forget. And believe me, that boy will never forget this. A week later, a courier delivered a small package. Inside was the key fob to my silver car, along with a handwritten letter. It was from Dennis. I almost threw it away, but some lingering maternal instinct made me open it. The letter was a rambling, tear-stained confession. He wrote about how Monica had been poisoning his mind for years, subtly at first, then more overtly after Larry's diagnosis. She had convinced him that I was incapable, that my money would be squandered, that it was his duty to take control for my own good. He admitted that he had been weak, that he had allowed her greed to eclipse his love for me. He wrote about the moment he read the documents in the car. He said it was like a bucket of ice water had been thrown on him, shocking him out of a long, terrible dream. Seeing it all in black and white, my competency, my distrust, my disinheritance, forced him to see the truth of what he had become. He wrote that he and Monica had fought, the ugliest fight of their lives, and he had finally seen the cold, grasping woman Larry had warned me about. He had told her to leave. He had filed for divorce. The letter ended with a simple, desperate plea. I know I don't deserve it, but I am begging you to forgive me. I have lost my wife, I have lost my inheritance, but the thought of losing my mother is the only thing that truly terrifies me. I love you, Mom. I was just too stupid and weak to show it. I read the letter 3 times. The words were raw, stripped of artifice. I could feel the genuine pain and remorse in them. My heart, which had felt like a block of ice for a week, began to thaw. He was still my son, the little boy whose scraped knees I had bandaged, whose nightmares I had chased away. He had made a terrible mistake, a mistake born of weakness and poor judgment, but perhaps he was not lost to me entirely. Forgiveness, I realized, was not about absolving him of his actions. It was about releasing myself from the prison of my own anger and resentment. Holding on to that bitterness would only poison the new life I was trying to build. But forgiveness did not mean forgetfulness. It did not mean a return to the way things were. I called him. His voice was hesitant, fragile. Mom, I read your letter, Dennis, I said softly. I heard him take a sharp, hopeful breath. I forgive you. A sob broke from him, a sound of pure, unadulterated relief. But, I continued, my voice firm, things are going to be different now. The legal documents stand. My sister remains my power of attorney. The will remains as it is. My finances are my own, and they are not a topic for discussion ever. If you want to be in my life, you will be in it as my son, not as my future caretaker or my financial manager. You will respect my decisions, my independence, and my home. There will be boundaries, Dennis. Strong ones. If you can accept that, then we can try to rebuild. Yes, Mom, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Anything. I understand. I'll earn back your trust. I promise, and so we began the slow, cautious process of rebuilding. Dennis moved into a small apartment after his divorce from Monica, who, I later heard, had tried to contest their prenuptial agreement and failed spectacularly. He started visiting me on weekends. First it was awkward. He was deferential, hesitant, as if walking on eggshells. But slowly we found a new rhythm. He helped me in the garden, not because he was trying to prove a point, but because he seemed to genuinely enjoy the work. We really talked for the first time in years about his life, his job, his fears. He never once mentioned money. He treated me not as a fragile old woman, but as his mother, a person with her own thoughts, her own life, and her own future. One sunny Saturday, about 2 months after that horrible day, I finally took my trip up the coast. I packed a thermos of tea and a chicken salad sandwich, just as I had planned. I got into my beautiful silver car, the car that had become a symbol of my own quiet revolution, and I drove. With the windows down and the ocean air whipping through my hair, I felt a sense of peace that was deeper and more profound than the giddy excitement I had felt when I first bought the car. It was not just the freedom of the open road I was experiencing. It was the freedom of self-respect. I had faced the greatest emotional challenge of my life and I had not broken. I had bent, I had grieved, but ultimately I had stood up for myself, for my dignity, and for the life that Larry had wanted me to have. I had saved myself. As I drove along the winding coastal highway, the blue Pacific sparkling beside me, I knew that my journey was just beginning. I was Alice King. And I was free. What would you do in this person's place? Was I too harsh, or did my son and his wife get exactly what they deserved? I often wonder about the different paths my life could have taken if I hadn't listened to my husband's last piece of advice. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Write me where you heard this story. It brings me joy to know how far these tales travel. Like the video and subscribe to my channel for more stories of life, loss, and the strength we find when we need it most. There are many other stories waiting for you. If you feel moved to support the creation of more content like this, you can use the Super Thanks feature to leave a donation. Every bit helps me continue to share these important narratives. With heartfelt greetings. Until next time.